So the liberals were expecting that there was going to be this truth and reconciliation thing today with schools and changing their curriculum. But at the last minute, Doug Ford scrapped it and gave them all a call like the day before and said, oh, we're no longer going to be doing this. So, I find that pretty funny. The liberals are probably like, yeah, he hasn't said he's going to cut it yet. At the last minute, it just gets cut and they're like, fuck, we were going to give people those jobs and this and that, and we were going to propagandize young white people in Canada to tell them that they're all racist and what they did to the natives was horrible and all this shit. Feel bad for yourself, because that's pretty much what a lot of these courses end up doing in the end of the day. It's like, they're like, oh, we're going to teach you about native history, but they just teach you how bad white people were to natives, right? So it's like, you're just going to learn about that. And then what they wanted to do is they were going to have an American Sign Language and Indigenous languages in kindergarten. Like, this is a waste of money. Okay, sign language. Is there a massively increasing amount of deaf people or something? Why do kids need to learn sign language? I've met like 2 deaf people in my life. Okay, you don't need to learn sign language. This is not a necessity. See, this is the problem. These governments, these liberal governments, they just throw money at shit. They're like, yeah, well, let's teach them this, and then we'll teach them indigenous language that is dead and nobody uses, and that is going to be like a useless thing for them in the future. You're gonna teach a bunch of like white kids and brown kids from immigrants from other countries to learn like Ojibwe or something. Like, this is the most ridiculous nonsense ever. Like, I'm not against teaching, maybe adding some more history and stuff of Aboriginals within schools, which they did teach when I was in school, but I'm not opposed to adding some more of their history. They are part of Canada. But teaching a dead language, that is just a little bit too far. And, I'm not opposed to you learning your dead language. I'm not going to make a law forcing you not to learn it. Like, how things kind of used to be. Like, like French people were also not allowed to speak their own language in schools for a very long time. They were also treated like shit. But, like they're not getting any reconciliation or anything like that. My grandmother, like, yeah, she wasn't allowed to speak her own language. So, you don't see a lot of the same outrage coming from these people than you do from, kind of the Aboriginal community in Canada. But, like I said, like sign language, indigenous languages in kindergarten, like, they're just going to forget that shit immediately. And it's like, it's never going to be a popular language again. It's like what some people in, I think, California are doing. All these Mexicans took over, and then they started teaching like like some dead language, some Aztecian language in like universities. It's like, okay, it's just a waste of fucking money, a waste of people's time, resources, and taxpayer money. Okay, that is essentially what it is. It's just a waste of fucking money. But almost immediately, educators and Indigenous leaders from across the province spoke out against the government's decision to cancel the curriculum rewrite using the hashtag #TeachersForTRC, so the Truth and Reconciliation Agreement. One of them was a former Ontario Regional Chief, Isadore Day, who described the importance of education in bringing reconciliation efforts for Indigenous peoples to light. So essentially, he's saying it's important to indoctrinate people, Canadians, that they're horrible for mistreating natives and putting them in residential schools. And we got to keep telling them how horrible they are. And you got to keep throwing money at people and keep giving us money. And it's like, this guy is a chief. He's probably exploited his own people like crazy. He's probably rich. He's probably driving a BMW, living it up in a nice big house. When you drive through reserves and it's just like squalor. Like the other day I drove back from my dad's and I knew I was in a reserve just by the way I looked around the houses, how they were separated. far apart, and they were all the same, shitty. And then you see one nice house that's big and rich. You're like, oh, that's where the chief lives. You know right away. He's got four-wheelers outside of his house, a boat, this and that, right? It's just a fucking scam, the majority of it. And indigenous peoples to light. The Ford government should take pause, Day told iPolitics. For the government to pull the plug like that, you're now cutting off oxygen for a new way forward for a province that simply has had much of the responsibility for the residential school legacy. It's like, we're never going to live that up. And people, they play up this residential school thing a lot worse than it actually was. We're acting like it was crazy apartheid or something. It was like they weren't allowed to speak their language in school, okay? That's it. They could still speak their language at home. Like I said before, my grandma was also not allowed to speak her own language in school. She's not getting reconciliation. She was also beat and hit and like kids died of tuberculosis and shit. But nothing for them, right? And it's like, it's like, well, you're French, but you're also white. So, we can't really, say that you were oppressed or anything like that, because that would kind of go against our whole fucking narrative and shit, right? But it's like, you don't see them clamoring necessarily for, us to be taught or given all this money based on what happened to them in school and shit too. And even a lot of English kids and stuff were treated pretty badly and stuff. But, we're never going to live this up. We're never, this truth and reconciliation thing is going to be held over our heads for as long as they can keep it going, right? It's never going to end until people are like, okay, enough is enough. We've reconciled enough. And secondly, I didn't take your land. I didn't do this shit. I didn't do anything. My ancestors came to Canada, right? They were told to come here to be farmers, and they farmed the land, and like a lot of people left, they were some of the best farmers that came here. Not many people could do it, and they tilled it all themselves. They lived in an overturned fucking wagon for 2 years, until they built their own house, right? Like it's insane that the way that people think. It was just like, oh, we're just given to you or this and that. It's like, no, these people helped build this fucking society and all this shit. And it's like, you're just gonna ignore all that and think like, okay, well, because some white people treated you bad, we all have to take all of your fucking shit and give it to Aboriginal people or give it to immigrants because of what a subset of your group did. And it wasn't even like just the English, it's mostly the governments that go in there and take land or do this and do that. And one of the major issues in Canada is not that we're taking all your shit, it's that we're giving you too much shit. That is the problem. Like, the more money that we're funneling into these communities, the worse that they seem to be getting. So we need to stop keep funneling money into this shit, because it's not working. We can't fix issues by throwing money at things. It will never work that way, because we see, like I said, the chiefs get a hold of money. Then because of the ways our laws in Canada work, it's like we can't even have oversight over what they do with anything, since he signed that whole Truth and Reconciliation Act in 2016. There's so much shit now. It's like they have so much power. It's ridiculous. They have too much power for what we did. Okay, this is bullshit. They can hold up massive projects on energy and all this shit because they're like, well, we don't really like this deal. We're not getting enough money from this deal. This and that. All these other Canadians aren't getting any benefit from it, and then they'll go and they'll hold it up. Then they'll finally let it through if they get enough money. And it's like, a lot of these Aboriginal people, they'll act like, oh, it's for the land and all this shit. And then once, like I said, yeah, they get a good deal, they're like, okay, let's go home. Who cares about the land? We got a bunch of money now. You know, we know in Canada all we have to do is get up, bitch and moan and blah blah blah, call everybody racist, talk about residential schools and reconciliation and all this shit, and then people will just throw money at us because they want us to go away and they don't want to hear anymore. So they go, okay, just take this and go on your reserve and don't bother us anymore, you know. And then, you know, a few years later, then they come back, oh, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this, right? So like it's never going to fucking end. You know, Indigenous voices need to be okay. The decision also took heat from the liberal Indigenous Affair critic Natalie Desrosiers, who said in a statement that the abrupt cancellation of her government passed initiative is worrisome. Whatever. Indigenous voices need to be heard, respected, and the government needs their insight when it comes to our curriculum. No, we don't. The statement reads, dialogue with Indigenous leaders is critical to the truth and reconciliation process. You know, this is another thing that it comes down with government schools too, because when you have this whole collective thing that everybody's paying into, then you have these justifications that people do kind of have where they're like, well, you know, we should be teaching everybody shit. We should be teaching this and that and Chinese and this and all this shit to be, you know, equal and you know, in the sake of like diversity or whatever, right? But that just makes everything run much slower. They can't focus on the things that matter. Now they're learning all these different languages and shit that they don't need to know. Like, you know, it would be better if there was private education, because then people could say like, okay, I just want to teach my kids English. That's it. I don't have to teach them Ojibwe. I don't have to teach them French and German and all this shit that the school prescribes me to do or the government prescribes that I do. I just want to teach them this. And then like you have some Aboriginal people, let them start a school, and if they just want to teach their kids a dead language, let them. And we'll see how that works out for them in the future. Right? You know, people need to learn from their mistakes. You know, this is the only way. You need the free market. You need private enterprise for people to figure out what works and what doesn't. And when you have the government constantly coming in, sustaining these like institutions, we learn about the mistakes too late. We'll look 10 years down the road, like, why is everybody so stupid? Why can't anybody read anymore? Why can't anybody do this? It's like, yeah, because we've dumbed down the curriculum to make it inclusive, to teach everybody's story perspective. But there's only so much time in a day, right? There's only so much time. You're in school for 8 hours a fucking day, and a lot of the time you're in recess and this and that. Your teachers are shit. They're not really teaching you half the time anyway. So there is a short amount of time in the day and in a kid's youth to learn this shit. So you can't really fill their head with a bunch of useless nonsense that is not going to help them in the future when they grow up. But, you know, blah, blah, blah. And then they're like, the Ontario History and Social Science Teachers Association spoke out against the decision, calling it disturbing. So, history and social science teachers, should those two be together? Like, I don't know, is history a social science? I'm not sure. Honestly, I don't know. Because it seems like, you know, that social science is more subjective. History, you could say, you know, after postmodernism type shit, oh, it's all subjective, but history is based on facts. It is based on, documents, or is based on records, historical records, is based on a reality. So I don't think that history and social sciences should be melded together, because, you know, that's what they're going to do. They're going to impose their fucking ideological worldview on history and look at it through like a feminist fucking lens or some shit, right? You know, so it's like they can't really look at history factually, you know. So I don't think these two associations should be together. And right away when I see that name, you know, social science and history, I'm not against social sciences either, if you're, you know, get me wrong, but I don't think those two should be linked. And the true cost is in the delay in working together to educate ourselves and our students about this most pressing issue. Is it really a pressing issue to learn teach your kids in kindergarten how to learn like native languages? Is this a pressure? Is this really that big of an issue? Like, who, where's the job market for this? I don't know. There isn't one. But the true cost of this, students' most pressing issue, they said it is vital that all students have the chance to learn about the indigenous histories, perspective, and contemporary issues, history in a respectful way at all grades. So whatever that means, learning about their histories in a respectful way. How do you learn about history in a respectful way? Like, do you think we're just in class and we're looking at natives and we're like, and then the savages did this, and then there are savages? Like, what? I don't know. What this essentially means, probably, learning it in a respectful way is like, well, you're white, you did all this shit, it's your fault, and you should atone for it, and blah blah blah. Because I don't know what that really fucking means, in a respectful way. The 60-second recommendation of the Truth and Reconciliation asks all levels of government to consult with survivors, educators, and indigenous peoples about an appropriate mandatory curriculum that includes various aspects of indigenous history. So it's like, right there, this is the problem with government again. It creates bureaucracy that now you have to go through all these stopgaps to learn something, to teach something, to change the curriculum. You got to go speak to these people now. Go speak to this elder. Go speak to the survivors. And if you get all their consent unanimously, then you can proceed. It's like, no, see, this is why you need private education, so you can just do things. Do things that work instead of going through all this bureaucracy, all this red tape, all these regulations that force you to do what the fuck the government wants you to do. If Ford followed blah blah blah, if Ford followed the lead of the TRC, Dade said, the Truth and Reconciliation Act, Dade said, he would realize the government-to-government relationship would be beneficial for the economic and social good of the province as a whole. So I don't know what he meant by that. The government-to-government relationship, is he talking about the Aboriginal government with the government of Ontario, or is he talking about the provincial government with the federal government? I'm not really sure, but I know Aboriginals pretty much have their own governments now, especially under Trudeau signing that Truth and Reconciliation Act. Like, it gave them so many extra rights that regular Canadians do not have, and frankly, they do not deserve. The reconciliation has been brought forward by the survivors. He said, we want to make sure we have something that continues from government to government, whatever. And this is the last statement of the article. It's just kind of funny. It's like, Ontario's new premier also made headlines recently after he paired the Ministry of Indigenous Affairs under Greg Rickford, the same man in charge of energy, mines, and northern development. So that probably pissed them off, because they're like, you just reduced bureaucracy even more. You lumped all of these positions together, which is a good thing, right? You don't need to hire another executive guy or whatever, pay him $150,000 a year, $250,000 a year to do what? Right? To do nothing. The Truth and Reconciliation thing that they did sign a couple years ago, they didn't really start to do a lot of what they did promise, right? A lot of the things that they did promise they were going to do. I remember, like, there was the panel that Trudeau put together for them, and they're like, yeah, we still haven't really done anything. It's been 2 years, so they're going to do nothing anyways. And, if you want something done, you give it to the busy person. You don't give somebody a job where they're doing almost nothing. You give them something to do. They're going to do it really slowly, really lazily. But if they're used to working hard, working a lot and shit, like you are in a free market, you're busy, you're going to get that shit done quickly. You're going to do it efficiently or more efficiently, unless your workload is too overburdensome. But that isn't the case when it is in the government for a lot of these jobs like this, like overseeing the reconciliation. Like, what? How hard is that? Really, you gotta meet some people, talk to some people. Like, these are not back-breaking, laborious fucking jobs. It's stupid shit. But it's a good thing that he is minimizing it, and they're probably mad that he picked like a white guy to do it. It's like, it should have been a native person to run the reconciliation. You need natives to talk to natives, you know, because white people are just racist inherently, and they're never going to give them a good deal. So, you know, this is the whole thing with diversity and all that crap. It's really just less white people because the white people cannot be fair, apparently. And the only way we can be fair to minorities and women, all this shit, is to get rid of white men and to put them in these positions so they can understand what these people are going through. And I'm not saying that they can't. Like, there is some truth to, yeah, a woman can see from a woman's perspective better than a man. But in a lot of these cases, when it comes to these positions of power and shit, you don't need forced diversity like you have now. Like, you know, you just want it to run efficiently. You don't want money wasted, and you don't want corrupt fucking people in there. But when you just promote people based on diversity, you're not looking into them as much, and you know, you're just waiting to get screwed, because they will screw you eventually. But that's all I pretty much had to say. If you like my content, subscribe and have a good day. And sorry for the video for taking so long. I know it was a lot longer than I normally take, but like I said, if you like my content, subscribe. Look in the links below. Follow me on Twitter, BitChute, Gab, and Minds. You know, I don't use those as much, but you know, follow me on that just in case I get permanently suspended on Twitter again, like I did a different time. But take it easy, guys. Have a good one.